The Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, often in the order that they are referred to, they are still the best band that ever was, and really, they're the only true band in the history of popular music. And, well, what do I mean by that? Am I ignoring all the other groups that existed? Well, not exactly. To first explain what I mean, they were the first band, probably ever, that you can even think of, where every member had an equal say. Of course, in the beginning, Lennon and McCartney, which is still the greatest songwriting partnership ever. They were the de facto leaders of the group. But still, contributions from George and later Ringo, they all got to do their own thing at some point in their history. And it was the first time that the other members were really integrated. It wasn't just one star in the backing band like Elvis and Bill Black and Scotty Moore. Of course, that wasn't ever really considered a band. It was Elvis and his players. But think about Bill Haley and the Comets, James Brown and the Famous Flames, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, or the Jimi Hendrix Experience a little bit later on, or probably most famous of all, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, which was the main inspiration for how the Beatles came up with their name. But with the Beatles, it was just the Beatles, and he knew all of their names, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, even if, for a while, George and Ringo might not have been front and center. But they all had personalities, and no one else around that time had personalities. They didn't look like people of the time, but that's because they gave us the 1960s. They gave us their hairstyles and all their culture, and the best thing about the Beatles was that when you watched them in anything they did, A Hard Day's Night, for example, it's one of the most energetic films ever made. It's just in general, for a lot of reasons, one of the most influential films. But particularly, nothing like that had ever been done, where it wasn't just the music. You were attached to them because there's something about them. It was really to see them having this unprecedented success and all the fun that went along with going around the world, especially coming to America. And they're bigger than Jesus, they really were, you know. To watch them have fun as they were having was really the most fun thing about it. You couldn't watch them and not feel like you were having fun. It was infectious. But on every album that they ever did, on every song that they ever did, even the ones that they were lazy about, you feel at once that it's a piece of experimental music. It's an artistic boundary push. Unbelievably catchy, unbelievably harmonious. The quality of the songwriting, the quality of the compositions. There was never anything like the Beatles. They were more than rock and roll. They've invented I don't know how many subgenres. Paul McCartney invented heavy metal. Whatever pop music is, they invented that, a very simple formula about everyday things. They're still the best sounding band today. There's not a better singer out there than John Lennon or Paul McCartney. There were possibly better guitar players than George Harrison. The Beatles weren't necessarily the best musically gifted band, but of course it was everything, the whole package. They had artistry, they had personality, and it's something that most other bands lacked. They never had personality quite like the Beatles. They never had the artistry. The Rolling Stones, they were having their first songs were either covers like the Beatles' first songs were, or they were co-written with the Beatles. Led Zeppelin, I don't want to talk about the plagiarism that plagues most of their catalog, but the Beatles are still today the most relevant band. Their culture is ubiquitous in modern culture and modern music. And if you don't think they were all talented individually, look at their solo careers. They knew when to end the band and go on to do other things. And music was never the same once they left. They were bigger than anything else, and they were bigger than music. And we owe so much to the Beatles. The only, as far as I'm concerned, the true continuation of American music, rock and roll, which was really just purely American music. But the Beatles were the first band, truly the first band and the only band, I think, to really come along and take that into the next generation.